One thing that never quite gets old in Breath of the Wild is being able to blow up just about anything. It's quite satisfying, but how these explosions seem to work seems to be a bit hard to decipher at times, as despite their visual similarities, all explosions are not created equal in this game, with many boasting hidden damage stats, burn factors, and even some hidden nerfs that dictate both how they can damage enemies and even the player. But there's no need to linger on this mystery anymore, because after testing out every single explosion possible in the game, from player ones to enemies, the methods for each of them have finally been fully decoded, including bomb arrows, bomb barrels, lightning boom, Lynel's big boom, and anything else that relates to the subject will be addressed today. There is a lot to go over, so this is going to be pretty rapid fire. So without further delay, let's get right into the stats. Out of all that exist, the most important one to understand is the player's bomb arrows, which, like a lot of the explosions in this game, consist of 3 damaging parts. First is the main explosion, which deals a fixed 40 damage, then the fire effect, which deals a flat 10, then finally the fire's burning effect, which varies between 0 and 15 damage depending on things such as distance from and duration in the blast. Since none of these factors can be increased with any buffs like attack up, this means that an enemy can take up to 65 damage per bomb arrow, on top of the damage of your base bow shots when applicable. However, since the fire and burning damage can only affect enemies with no elemental resistance, such as bokoblins, lizzles, and other normal enemies with elemental resistance, such as bosses and Lynels, are only affected by the 40 points of explosion damage and nothing else relating to the fire. On top of this, an enemy who is already on fire via anything will not take the bomb's fire or burning damage, as it is still undergoing its own elemental effect. So in short, the 40 explosion damage is fixed for those explosions, but the elemental fire and burning damage is conditional to the type of enemy and their current effect. But as long as the bomb's 3 parts are understood, this helps break down other explosions in the game, one of the major ones being the bomb barrels. These guys may be OP in the early base game, but they really don't age all too well when revisiting them later on, doing only a sliver of damage to the tankier enemies you'll soon encounter. However, despite the fact that they are all identical in appearance, the game actually has 3 different types of bomb barrels featured in its world that are all at varying power levels. The weak tier 1s, which appear more in areas close to the plateau and Necluda, the medium tier 2s, which appear commonly at further reaches like the deserts and more outer map areas, and finally the strong tier 3s, which appear more commonly in Hebra and other more advanced areas. I'll have this map here of them for anyone who wants to use that as reference. Out of the 3 tiers of barrels, the tier 2s are identical to how the bomb arrows work, with the 40 explosion damage, 10 fire, and 0 to 15 potential burning. Although I noticed a higher chance of getting closer to the 15 burning damage more due to the more fiery nature of the barrels. The other 2 tiers of barrels are identical in almost every other way, except the high tier 3s do 80 explosion damage, while the weak tier 1s do only 4. You heard that right, it's pretty pathetic. But I guess it does make sense, as these barrels are tiered appropriately around the world depending on which enemies are at which camps. However, the nice thing about bomb barrels, and even bomb arrows, is that their explosion damage can stack additively with other nearby booms, which can rack up a lot more damage, but be mindful that sometimes these explosions can get blocked off jaggedly by other terrain or objects, so they might not all connect. Another good way to increase an explosion's damage, which is also applicable with bomb arrows, is by freezing a target beforehand. So the first explosion done to it will deal triple damage, which is especially great for those tier 3 barrel explosions that naturally deal 80 damage, tripled for 240 plus its elemental effects. This can all rack up some pretty fun damage, but what about the biggest explosion a player can create? A multi-shot bow with bomb arrows. In-game, it looks absolutely destructive, but apparently the game devs thought so too. So hidden nerfs were added to the multi-shots with bomb arrows specifically to weaken the hell out of these explosions to be a lot less effective, and here's how. Although the fire and burning damage remains the same for them, each explosion in a multi-shot only deals 24 damage instead of 40. This isn't the worst by itself, especially if you have a 5-shot bow, but what actually makes this bad is that if these shots are planted on an enemy, like you're probably trying to do, only 2 of the 24 damage explosions will affect them, and the rest act essentially as duds. The only way to get those all to work is by shooting the ground itself for splash damage, and at that point you're better off just shooting them for arrow damage. I mean, it makes sense why some of these nerfs would be applied, as if they behaved normally, it would be far too OP for normal play, but these nerfs are quite the embarrassment to the known might of a multi-shot bow. Regardless, bomb arrows and bomb barrels remain the two major ways a player can deal explosion damage to enemies, but the only thing left to know about them is how these explosions can affect the player, as it's slightly different. The base explosion damage will do the same to both enemies and the player, so a 40 damage explosion will deal 40 HP, aka 10 hearts, to Link, but the fire and burning damage only deals a total of 6. The explosion damage can be reduced by armor all the way down to 1, while the fire can be completely negated via the fireproof set bonus on the Flamebreaker armor. This is all going to be pretty important when talking about the next category of explosions, ones that specifically target the player, and we can start off with the most notable of them, the Guardians. A single blast from one of these guys will deal out a total of 58 damage, the explosion part dealing 52, and the fiery parts dealing 6, which can each be negated the same ways as before. The only difference is that the explosion can only be reduced all the way to 8 damage regardless of armor. The Guardian Scouts work in a similar manner with their deadly charge blasts, except these guys deal 69 damage, 60 being the explosion, and 9 being the burning, with the explosion damage only being able to be reduced to 12. There doesn't seem to be a unique formula to why these do different than other bombs, but that's why it's good to take all these as their own. Since the maxed out Flamebreaker set blocks out up to 60 normal damage on top of negating all flame damage, this makes it more ideal than any other armor set against fighting Guardian enemies, as you're only getting dealt the 2 or 3 hearts at max, which ironically is better than even the maxed out Ancient set, which still allows the fire damage to affect the player on top of that. This is why elemental armor can be quite important in the game, and this carries us onto another type of important explosion, lightning. A full blast of this is able to deal 58 damage, the same as a normal Guardian blast, but the way it's broken up is a lot different. The base explosion of this strike is only a mere 9 damage, which can all be negated with armor points, while the electricity damage is 49, which cannot. The only way to get this one down is either a level 3 electricity resistance buff, which can cut this in half to 25, or one of the lightning proof items such as the Thunder Helm or the Rubber Set bonus, which have special lightning cutting abilities to not only block all the electrical damage, but the explosion damage too. Also, enemies can be affected by this blast too if they're in your blast radius, but the effects are fairly weak, dealing only 20 electricity damage and a little boom on top of that. But there is one rule-changing thing you can do to make these blasts effective. When lightning is about to strike Link, switch out of your metallic weapons to pawn the lightning off on the enemy's metal weapon instead, and the lightning will then strike them for an instant kill every time. This is a way more effective use of lightning, and a great way to weaponize your environment. Speaking of weapons, the only other player one we really didn't go over yet is the player's remote bombs, which deal 12 at base and 24 when upgraded, with no extra added quirks. Although this is pretty common knowledge, it's at least worth mentioning. But this allows us to leave off on the final major explosions in the game related to this world's bosses. The first of which is Calamity Ganon's gigantic fireball explosion, which oddly enough works the same exact way as the Guardian Scouts from earlier, as a direct hit deals 69 damage, 9 of which is fire damage, and the 60 of it being an explosion that can be reduced all the way down to 12 with armor. But it's pretty rare that the thing will actually hit you dead on, and more than likely you'll just get hit by its blast, which despite its destructive size only deals 10 damage, or 6 with the Flamebreaker. However, despite all the explosions we talked about, not a single one will match the destructive might of a Gold Lynel's explosion, which triumphs every other explosion by dealing a total of 216 damage, with only 6 of that being the flame part, which in comparison, a player can only have a max of 120 HP. And with the best possible armor and defense, this blast will still deal 104 damage. This is so high that even with the max Flamebreaker armor and health and defense buff, it'll still one-shot the player. So this is actually the one explosion in the game that is better guarded via pure armor points than elemental resistance, or just pray that you can get a lucky parry or headshot to avoid it altogether. But if you're still a little confused on how player damage, health, and armor points work in this game, I do have a detailed separate video on it in the card above. You'll probably notice a few similar things mentioned in this one, but I recommend it as a highly important watch. But anyways, that is everything about explosions we have to go over today in the video. It was quite fun to research into all of this, and hopefully this knowledge on explosions will allow you to use and think of them more appropriately in the game. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to like and subscribe for more content to come. But anyways, thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you all soon. Goodbye!